And that's the essence of persuasion. And that's what's really attractive to me. Attractive enough to create a presentation about it, and soon a blog post, and maybe even more presentations, depending on what kind of feedback I get from you guys. So I started to go to work on this idea of what I call the overlap. What happens when you have A and B and you overlap them? Here's a very simple version of that. You see what I've done here with this overlapping circles. I have two things, and if they were apart like this, you would say, well, they're completely separate and apart. They have nothing in common. But it turns out they do have something in common. Not much, but enough maybe to have a conversation about, or enough maybe to persuade these two groups to stay together or to work together. Now and this is called, by the way, the Venn diagram. It's named after a 19th century mathematician by the name of John Venn. You probably didn't know that. V-E-N-N. He's a Brit. More about John in a minute. So this is a very easy Venn diagram. And if you wanted to think about a Venn in your life, I'll give you some examples. And grab a pen, because I want you to think about this for a few minutes after the program, maybe even later today. I'm going to give you a few examples of a Venn diagram. And then we'll talk about real life rotary stuff that might be interesting to you, or your work, right? Easy examples of a Venn diagram would be ice cream and television, right? Because you like to eat ice cream while you watch television. In fact, if you like to snack, like I do sometimes when I'm watching TV, I think about both at the same time. I don't even think about them as separate and apart. That's a Venn for me, man, right? How about this? Spaghetti. Where's my buddy Joe Caruso? Spaghetti, meatballs. You see the Venn diagram there? I would never think of having spaghetti without meatballs, or vice versa. How about this for some of you? Shower, soap. You'd never shower without soap, right? And so it's a Venn diagram, and they fit together very nicely. Now, what I want to talk about is how I use this in my world and how this really resonated with me, and you may feel the same way. Some of you know, if you read my bio, that I'm a consultant, a communication consultant. In fact, I just got a call this week. I basically teach presentation skills, but I think everything's a presentation, right? So I got a call this week for a municipality here in Michigan that's having a little bit of trouble getting along. 7 people on the council, 7 spheres of influence, and maybe not enough overlap, maybe not enough Venn diagram, right? One guy in particular I hear is the bad news bear, right? And so they want somebody like me, I haven't gotten the gig yet, but they want somebody like me to come in and see if we can get these people to fly in the same airspace. It's not going to be an easy job. But one of the ways I prepare for this is I start, as a consultant, I start connecting the dots. Why is he like this? Who are his advocates on the council? Who doesn't he get along with? Where is he coming from? What are his ideologies? Is he the only Democrat on a council full of Republicans? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of these questions. But when you get behind the curtain, there's a front of the curtain and there's a back of the curtain. When you get behind the curtain, you can learn a little bit more about the psychology and how people roll. And this is intriguing to me. So, I'll let you know what happens with the gig, but that's the idea. So back to our buddy John Venn, who discovered this thing. He actually built the background is on probability and statistics, which is interesting to me. But he actually capitalized on George Boole. I think his name is pronounced Boole, and he was a mathematician the generation before. Boole had an interesting life and an even more interesting death. So the way it happened was, and this happened with Plato, and so it was Plato, Socrates, and then Aristotle. Plato never wrote anything down, but his protege, Socrates, did. So we know a lot more about Socrates than we do about Plato. And the same kind of thing happened with George Boole and then John Venn, is that John Venn made George Boole famous, right? So Boole's life was interesting. His death was even more interesting. Check this out. Boole, one day, walked 3 miles in the rain to give a lecture. He was soaking wet. He gave the lecture in the wet clothes, and he got sick. So he's at home, and his wife's looking after him. And one of the this is before urban legends, but one of the what do you call it? Medical procedures of the day. You know, the common thinking of the day was that if you wrap the person in wet clothing, that they'll get better. Now, keep in mind that's how he got sick. So she wraps him in wet clothes to help him get better, and he dies of pneumonia. So she effectively killed her husband. So maybe that's why old George didn't get to finish his work on what would have been known as the Boole diagram. But the Venn diagram came about from John Venn. Now let's talk about some interesting examples of the Venn diagram in the Rotary world. Think about this easy one. So you got passion here, and you've got, say, talent here, right? So we were talking earlier with Lizzie Martin, who's your public image chair. Lizzie has a passion for public image, and it turns out she's pretty good at it, maybe really good at it, right? And what do you do for work, Lizzie? Take yourself off mute if you would.
I work in advertising.
So she works in advertising. She found a way to get paid for it, right? And when you do the paid, talent, passion, and talent, and you merge them all together, you've got a pretty good thing going on. Sally was maybe the same example. She loves to travel. She has a talent for understanding deals and how they got packaged, right? And she figured out how to get paid for it with her talent agency. It's the perfect Venn diagram, right? Same thing with me. I came up through the music business. My brothers and I performed in a touring rock band. We opened for acts like Rick Springfield, Corey Hart, Joan Jett. Thumbs up if you recognize any of these names. And I learned that I was not only pretty good in front of audiences, but I really liked it. It was kind of like a drug for me, right? And then I figured out how to get paid for it. You see how this could work out? So that's another easy example of a Venn.